Yo, yo, yo. Welcome back into another episode of Jake's Takes. I am your host, Jake Masucci, and today we got another edition of the show. Today I got on my guy, Asher Smith. We're talking about some college basketball, and it's been an unbelievable season. I mean, unreal season. And I'm super excited. We're going to get into everything. We talk Big Ten, we talk SEC, we talk rivalries, we talk the whole joint. So if you haven't watched much college basketball, this is a very good catch up. And I'm super excited to have Asher on. I mean, we're getting closer and closer to March Madness, and it's perfect time for it now because NFL's over, college football's over, and this is the main sport to watch. You know, March Madness is right around the corner, and we got to get set up for it. We got to get ready. So without further ado, I'm going to cue the music. All right. Welcome back into the show. And I am super excited to have back on my guy, Asher Smith. He's back with us. We're talking college basketball. Last time we were on, I think we're previewing the season, and this college basketball season has just been wild. And now that the NFL is over, everything else is done. All that anybody's watching is college basketball. So I'm happy to have you back on, Asher. Welcome into the show.
Thank you, Jake. Yeah, it's been an awesome couple of weeks catching up on B-ball. I feel like we're getting glimpses of March in February. It's just been so fun as a viewer and, trying to help the viewers learn a couple of the teams they should be looking out for, as well as some of the players that I've liked. I think that, if we can pinpoint some early bracket busters for people now, that'll just help them watch these next couple weekends because it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So let's get right into it. I got a question for you to start. And I mean, like, we're going to talk SEC, we're going to talk Big Ten because those are the two main conferences that everybody wants to learn about. But, like, if there's one thing, like, other than that, like, other than SEC, other than Big Ten, what has stood out to you about this college basketball season so far?
Yeah, we've had a couple of conference themes for sure. I think the other two that you and I were kind of high on was obviously Big 12 and ACC. We've seen some downplay in the Big 12, some risers in the ACC. I think that the biggest standout for me so far has been the Duke Blue Devils. I think that they were a team that knew they were Final Four odds coming in pretty high with returning a decent group and bringing in solid freshmen. But the entire offseason, freshman wise, was around Cooper Flag and the two guys at Rutgers, right? And we've seen exactly opposite paths with those teams. We've seen Cooper Flag be top 25 in points per game, leading his team to an absurd 20-win season already in February, taking care of rivals, winning on the road. Just a big mix of what you want to see if you're going to draft someone number one overall, right? And then if you go into what Rutgers is doing, you see two of the top five lottery picks this year, no doubt, some of the best talent I've ever seen. And yet they are struggling to field a team that can make the NCAA tournament, right? So
Yeah.
in terms of who has been shining this season, obviously the older teams always have an advantage. But I thought that what Cooper Flag is doing at Duke and what Coach Shire is doing, bringing in guys like him as a freshman who are just ready to fit the mold of a national championship team in the hard months of January and February was really cool to watch, and also just a study of why Shire's philosophy at Duke is going to be pretty great for them for the next couple of years. So, we're going to talk a lot about the big two conferences now. I don't think that the Duke North Carolina rivalry is going anywhere. I think that Duke is going to have a team that will put the ACC at the top again this year. We'll see them in the Final Four. We'll see them in hopefully the championship game. I like what they're doing. I think that it's a team that was seasoned at the beginning of the year, and we're seeing that now with the amount of wins they've been able to pull off.
Yeah. No, they've been incredible to watch throughout the whole year, and they're kind of running away with the ACC right now with their 14-1 record in there. It's really just been sensational to watch a guy like Cooper Flag just dominate the way he's been. I mean, he's leading their team. He's at 19.8 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, 4 assists. He's leading them in all three of those categories. It's like, geez, like what the heck, Like he's just been unreal, and a lot of people are giving him hate, like saying like, oh, he drives to the basket and he slips and falls and he can't make the play. No, he's been sensational. All right. Those have been some tough plays to make. And that Clemson game, like, it's hard to win games at Clemson every time. Like, Clemson's just one of those environments where it's like, dang, like, it's tough. And they're 13-2 themselves in the ACC. They're tied for second with Louisville right now. So looking at it that way, like, I really think Duke has just been so impressive this year. Con Knipple is unreal. He's like, he's just given them so much with his shooting ability. It's crazy how he can score like at three levels, and he's sensational. Tyrese Proctor has been awesome. And then their bigs have been really impressive. You know, they got a lot of freshmen, young guys that have really stood out and really shown their athleticism and rim protection. To me, I think Duke's like really legit just because of the fact that like right now they're I think third in the country, maybe second. And like nobody should be saying, "Oh, Duke's not for real," because they're just unreal. Like they beat Auburn earlier in the season. They had a couple big time wins. I think one of their only losses was like Kentucky out of conference and stuff like that. So to me, Duke's incredible. I really like that you pointed them out.
Yeah, I think that we're gonna see what they're made of, as we get into the rivalry season and the ACC tournament. The biggest thing that everyone knows by watching college basketball is that even when the ACC's down, when it comes to winning tournament games, they're the best conference, right? And we're going to give props to the two best conferences later, but historically, like you're putting your money on an ACC team to win it all, and you have Duke sitting there with 22 plus wins, right? Like
Yeah.
it should be a no brainer, right? We're going to talk about every reason why they won't win it all next, but it should be a no brainer. You're watching great basketball, and a coach who's going to be there for a while. He brings in freshmen, he brings in transfers. It's a very, very exciting team that I think is going to be definitely a top seed going into March and should have their way into the Final Four.
Yeah, no, agreed, 100%, 100%. So I got the top 25 in front of me, all right? And I'm looking at it, and if you look at the top 6, 4 of those teams are SEC teams. Like it's just flat out ridiculous looking at it that way. So I want to center on the SEC just a little bit here. Talk to me about like we were talking before the show with ESPN only putting SEC games on because it's like top matchups and like unbelievable, right? So talk to me about the talent level of the SEC and what you've seen so far, what stands out to you.
Yeah, I think that's as a casual college basketball watcher, if you're tuning in the last couple Saturdays or the next few to get ready for the tournament, you'll see these low matchup games, 1 versus 3, 3 versus 5, right? Like top 10 games that you're wondering, like, well, how did they get these together? And then you're realizing, oh, it's just the entire top 10 of the SEC, right?
Yeah.
They've been ranked the entire year. They have had tough contests outside of conference. They took care of all of them. I think they all came in with above 500 records conference play. Now they're starting to play against each other, and you're realizing that any team can beat anyone on a given day, right? You could go into Tuscaloosa and get a win when you're not favored. You could host a home game against South Carolina and get beat, right? Like there's just up and down the conference, there are just teams that are ready to make deep runs into a lot of people's brackets. And they were saying it on the broadcast on Saturday for the Alabama Auburn game, but the SEC tournament might be a harder challenge for teams than the NCAA tournament, which is
Yeah.
crazy to think about because
Yeah.
the NCAA tournament is when you got to have good games or else you're done.
Yeah.
With certain seeding in the SEC, you could be the seventh best team in the SEC, a top 25 team in the country, and you got to play 4 top 5 teams to win your conference. Right? Just an absurd thing that I don't think we have seen before in college basketball, where a conference this deep can have this many top 10 teams, right? Usually they're when you're beating up on each other, you have people falling out of the top 25, right? Maybe on the bubble because they're losing these close games. Like the SEC is just so untouched by any other conference that we're at this point in the season now, we're mid-February, and you already have 10 of the top, feels like 20 seeds in the tournament are going to be from the SEC. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
No, it's wild. It's wild. And I think a perfect thing to kind of add on to what you're saying is like South Carolina's at the bottom of the conference. They're 0-12 in conference play. And they have a 10-15 record. So that means they were 10-3 before conference play started. Like that is ridiculous, you know? Like that just shows you the level of SEC basketball and like how talented it is. And another example is like Oklahoma's 3-9 in conference, and they were ranked number 18 in the country before conference play started. So like looking at it that way, it's just like every night in the SEC, you're playing one of the most talented teams. Like that we've seen, and I really think that's going to show when it comes to when the tournament happens and when the teams are getting in, because I think most of these teams will probably end up being tournament teams and be really, really dangerous when it goes through. And all of them will for sure be battle tested and ready to go when it comes that time. So, I mean, to me, like some of the things that stands out, like I think it's clear in SEC play that Auburn just stands out in front of everybody. I think they're tier one and nobody's touching them. And I think that includes Duke, a team that beat them earlier and a team that we talked about. But I was listening to a podcast today, and I believe that they have 14 quad one wins. And by the end of the
14.
year, have a chance to have over 20 quad one wins, which we've never seen like in the history of college basketball. Like that's just flat out ridiculous. And I mean, the way they've played, like that Alabama game this weekend was just so much fun to watch. There are four main guys that I've written down. Janai Broom, who's in the Wooden Award, a conversation, unbelievable post-up player, really monster offensive rebound player. And then Chad Baker Mazzara, one of the most electric defensive players. He's a stud on that end, and then can create his own on the offensive end as well. And then Pettiford and Denver Jones are just two guards that are just unreal. Denver Jones hit some shots against Bama where I was like, dang, like that was unreal. And then Pettiford had a terrible game. And then in a 65-65 game goes down and does a pull-up three. Like, and I'm like, what kind of shot is that? And then he drills it. And then Auburn like goes on a run and wins that game pretty handily. So to me, like they're just unbelievable to watch all over the place. They got guys. If somebody's out one game, they're ready. They're still able to create games and win them. To me, they're tier one. Do you have any argument when I'm talking about Auburn here?
I don't. I think that just to bring it up now that we're here, that was game of the weekend, probably game of the season so far,
Yeah.
right? Auburn,
Yeah.
Alabama, 1-2, going into Tuscaloosa, right? It's a road game, but it's in state. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
was there. College game day, right? Like that was, if you're going to show out on a stage in the regular season, like that is the best you can get, right? It was the top two teams. And what we saw from Pettigrew and Broom is just everything you want from someone who
Yeah.
is battle tested and having to play a hot 9 seed in the second round of the tournament, right? Like, doesn't matter who they're playing against, like who's coming in. It could be the second best team in the country at their own floor. Janai Broom's going to look like Joel Embiid controlling the pace of play and
Yeah.
making shots that no one is close to contesting, right? Like that was, I think, an unbelievable display of, we're playing the number one offensive team maybe in college basketball history in terms of pace and
Yep.
points.
Yep.
And we're holding them to under 100. We're controlling the pace of play. We're not making shots particularly well. And we're finding people that are, open in different sides of the floor, right? They're getting their third and fourth best scorer involved, right? Chad Baker Mazzara, I think, like,
Yep.
went crazy for a couple of minutes there, and you were like, is Pettigrew even in the game? And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden he hits a three to go, right? So I think that I fully agree with you. Auburn is one of one. I think they're going to be 45% of bracket picks, and you're going to be wondering why. Like they're not, a blue blood, if you will, in college basketball. Like this, the reason why is because this is what he's been building for 5 years, right? This is the team, and you can see that if you tune in on any Sunday against probably another top 10 SEC team.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Question for you about the rest, because I think like the next tier you'd probably put like Alabama, Florida, Tennessee, and then you could probably argue putting Kentucky in there or someone like that, right? So looking at like those kind of teams, like what teams kind of stand out to you other than Auburn and the SEC? If you had to pick like two or three.
Yeah, I think that, bottom of conference can beat anybody. Texas, Oklahoma might make the tournament, but they're not going to be someone I'm picking second weekend if they
Yeah.
sneak in, right? Like in terms of people that I think can contest Auburn for the SEC championship or even contest them in the Elite Eight game, right? If they match up again, because we'll likely see a lot of SEC versus SEC tournament games if we're lucky.
Mm-hmm.
I think that while you want to lean Alabama based on how they played against Auburn, I think the clear answer is Florida, right? And Florida, I think now is the number 2 team in the country, maybe top 5 in the other
Mm-hmm.
rankings, net and Ken Palm. I think the complete game that Florida has shown is better than any other SEC team. You'll have a lot of teams that are top 5 in offense who aren't top 20 in defense, right? Or, reverse it around. They're hovering at top 15 in both, right? Florida's got both sides of the ball. While Alabama is number 1 by far in offense, they've struggled in some games on defense, right? Florida never struggles. They're the best offensive rebounding team. That matters in March. They got 5 people that can score on the floor at all times. That matters if you're ever, trying to stop a run. They've been battle tested with some injuries, right? Martin has gone down, and that's definitely like a place where they've struggled, and they put in the next guy and they didn't miss a beat. And it's I don't know if it's again like a 1 and a 2 situation. It might be a 1 and everyone else in the SEC. But if I had to pick like who's going to be playing against Auburn in the SEC final, my bet right now is on Florida. I love what their coach is doing. I think Elijah Martin's great. and the rest of their team just gets the vibe that their coach is trying to put out there, where we're going to out hustle everybody, we're going to be disciplined, we're going to limit turnovers, we're going to do everything that is needed to beat a team like Auburn, and that's going to prepare them more than they know for the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, yeah, and I think a perfect example is what we saw the Saturday before when they went into Auburn and kind of handled them pretty easily. I mean, that score was 90-81, and that's the only other time we've seen Auburn lose this year besides that Duke game. And to me, like if if a guy like Walter Clayton Jr. is on, like
Mm-hmm.
there's not much you can do because he's incredible. Like he can shoot the crap out of the ball and he's all over the place on defensive end too. Like they get after people and they're running like all over the
Right.
place. And that's the impressive part to me. Like especially early in the year, I was just like, man, like I want to see a little more from Florida. Like I'm not sure. And then they keep pulling out these games. And then like with Golden, their coach, like there was all these scandals and things like that. I was like, oh, is this going to bother their chemistry? Is this going to bother the team? It hasn't. It hasn't. They've answered every call in that scenario. And Auburn's the same way. Like they get in a plane fight and all this stuff. You know, there's crazy stuff all over the program, and it doesn't matter. They're resilient. And those kind of stories and those kind of things, I think really play a big role in whether or not you can win in March. And both these teams have shown it. You know, both these teams have shown it time and time again. So to me, I agree with you. Florida's probably that main team. Bama's been on and off like throughout the year. I don't think it's been the best year for Marcus Sears. I think he's been solid, but like it hasn't been what we've expected, like Wooden Award worthy and things of that nature. Grant Nelson on Alabama, I think he's incredible cutter, incredible player. He's been big for them. And then Aiden Holloway, well, that was a big game for him because he went to Auburn last year and came back. He's a great player. I think he adds a lot for them as well. So Bama, I think high, but I would rather have a Florida team because Florida seems to get after you and get into you like mentally, and Auburn does the same thing. You know, I think another team that would probably be a good bet is Tennessee if they can get their offense going. And that question goes to Chaz Lanier. You know, they've had two weird games against Kentucky where it was just like shooting luck wasn't on their side in both of those games. And you can see like when the drain is on their offense and they're not scoring, their defense tends to deteriorate and that can kind of kill them. So I think it'll be interesting in those effects, you know, with those different teams. But I like what you're saying with Florida. Do you got anything to add on the other teams that I talked about there?
No, I agree. I'm not out on Alabama. I think that their floor is Final Four, right? Like they were the number one team last year and they showed everyone why, right? I think that
Yeah.
they were a unique number one team because their defensive rating is not spectacular, but that's because their offense is so great, right? Like they will outscore you in any type of game. And they did that in the tournament. You know what I mean? So I think people are out on them as a national champion. I'm not out on them as a deep running team. I think that they're a great team to place your money on. Like it's going to be a lot of fun games, a lot of close ones. They're going to make shots. Sears is going to come up in big moments. Like they'll be okay. I just think that the SEC style of play and defense might be beating them up a little bit more than it will in tournament. I think same can be said for Tennessee. Opposite end, they're the best defensive team in the country, right? And as you can see, that kind of stifles their offense sometimes, right? Like they might need to hold a team to under 60 to win a game if they're not shooting that well, which they can
Yeah.
do. It's just a high pressure environment, same as scoring 110 is for Bama. I think that those teams might not pass the eye test in the SEC play, but once we get into the tournament and they get a couple teams that aren't familiar with their game, kind of like Virginia used to do with Coach Bennett, they'll stifle any team that thinks that they know what's coming. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, Tennessee's in the Elite Eight. Why was I avoiding them in picking my bracket? Because, they're fifth in the SEC. Like
Yeah.
it's almost a smokescreen, I think, for how good both those teams truly are on offense and then vice versa on defense.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Before we move to Big Ten, is there any other SEC team that we haven't touched on that you're really intrigued by going into maybe March?
Yeah, I think you got to give your props to Texas A&M. I think
Yeah.
that they're quote unquote middle of the pack, and yet they're what, seven in the country. Like it's
Yep.
pretty
They're
hilarious.
awesome.
No one's picking them to win the big one, but yet they're you know taking care of the meat of the SEC and doing it well. Beating in-state rivals, beating some top teams. Like they'll have a tough road ahead for sure. Like they'll have to prove themselves in order to be like true like top 8 seed in the tournament. Like that's not going to be easy with the road that they have left. But if I look at them as a 4 seed, like I'm going to remember this point in the season where they're winning the tough games while people are injured, people are tired. Like they're doing it in February, and that's going to go a long way. I think in March when they might get a favorable pull as a 4 seed. You never know, right? So that's a team that I would just look out for. Don't expect them to pull off every single upset to get a top two SEC tournament look, but know that they're capable of definitely going on a 4-game run when it matters in March.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree completely. Wade Taylor the fourth is unreal on
Unreal.
and like the fact of the matter that they have a scorer like that, and then to me defensively they're like same level as Florida and Auburn will get into you physically and just get you off your game. And Tennessee, I think, is different level than all three of those guys.
Right,
But
right.
like and like really impressive defensively, and you got a scorer, so that makes you so dangerous. I feel like there'll be a 3 seed, and if they got like a good path, they could be scary for other teams as well.
Definitely.
Some SEC teams that like I'm not really concerned about would be like a Missouri. Like I don't, they haven't impressed me when I've watched them play. They also have a Northern Kentucky transfer from last year that I don't like, Marcus Warwick. He was just really, really good, and it's really bothersome for our run. But and then like Ole Miss. Ole Miss looked, the game that I watched mainly was when they beat Alabama and looked really good doing it. But the inconsistencies have just bothered me with their team. Like they should be a lot better. They have really, really talented bigs, and I feel like there's just more that I want. And then Kentucky's the same way. Like Kentucky's been injured throughout the year, and maybe we haven't seen them like at their best, and maybe they can figure something out. But to me, like they're on the same path as last year where they have a really, really good offense and their defense is like bottom of the pack. And I was telling everybody when they didn't listen to me last year that they were not going far. And I think the same thing this year.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I'm in agreement, and it's maybe not a fault of their own. They play in the best conference, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just going to be tough for them to get out, and that might lead to some seeding that doesn't work in their favor, or we'll be talking about which one of the 7 seeds from the SEC is going to make the run, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be tough. They haven't shown consistency to win in the next 3 weekends, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's where the champion's going to be found, right? That's when UConn started going on their run in the Big East. Like this is when we find who's going to be the best, and it just might be too deep of a conference this year, right? I will say I agree with your Ole Miss take. I think Mississippi State is actually the team that you want to look for out of that
I
rivalry,
like it.
right? I
I
think
like
that
it. Yeah.
what they showed against Ole Miss is important because that's a team that can get hot, like you said, in streaky ways. But they shut them down, right? They got the win. It was a ranked matchup that was huge. I like what their program's doing versus Ole Miss, where some games they look like they can dismantle anybody, and other games they're losing, and their coach is talking about taking the Indiana job. It's just
Yeah.
a tough, I think, environment to show the fans like, hey, we're dedicated to this year, we're going to win this year. Like it seems a little too late to put its pieces together, and you know, maybe pick them for the second weekend, but we'd have to see like who they're playing against for sure.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. I agree completely. Let's
How
move to the
crazy is
Big
it that
Ten.
we're having an SEC convo and Coach Cal and Kentucky don't come up, and they're not
Yeah.
even the same team? Like it's
Yeah.
just a crazy year for the SEC.
They're not the same team, and Arkansas is near the bottom of the SEC. Like it's kind of crazy, and
What's
and
going
I
on?
didn't think
Yeah.
that. I didn't think that going into it. I remember, I think it was like sometime in late January or February where Arkansas's last win was against Oakland before conference play started, and I was like, "What's going on?" you know, like it was wild because they're a really talented team. It's just SEC is crazy.
It's crazy, but we'll
Yeah.
see. Maybe next year, I think, get 1 year of coaching under their belt. Those guys will be fine.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree completely. All right, let's go Big Ten. So the two teams on the top, Michigan and Michigan State, like flat out wild, flat out wild. So I want to give you the floor and I want you to talk about Michigan. You got to be pumped. You got to be excited. So talk to me about the whole thing.
Yeah, I think last year, the same call, I was telling you I was excited that we were a football school again because basketball was the worst thing I've ever seen since I started being a fan of Michigan, right? And here I am thinking that Dusty May's got these guys ready to bring a championship back to the Big Ten. Like, I know it's a huge over exaggeration, but you look at what this team does in close games and you're like, they can beat anybody. They could go toe to
Yeah.
toe with anybody, right? Like, they, you know, had a couple of tough road tests in the Big Ten. They came out with wins, and they had a tough loss against Minnesota, the worst team in college basketball, some say. And then they go on a 7-game win streak, right? Like, it's just
Yeah.
crazy what Michigan has been able to pull off with a group of 5 starters who weren't with the program last year, right? Bench players that have been through a couple of coaches and a couple of rotations in the last 3 years. A head coach who probably was the hottest name coming out of a non-power 5 team and is now getting, other looks already with a group that he's completely turned around. So I
Yeah.
think that they have great guard play in Trey Donaldson. It works somehow to have 2 7-footers out there. They're limiting the turnovers. They're shooting the ball better. Like, they've gotten better since day one. And all a group needs with this many transfers is minutes on the floor together, right? Like,
Mhm.
they haven't played together ever, and now we're 25, 23, 25 games in, and you're like, oh, wait, these guys are actually pretty good. Well, now they know how to play together, right? Like, they've done it. They've gone and played heavy minutes in close games. They've blown teams out. They've, even experienced losses together. And that is huge for a new coach in a new city with 5 new players, 7 in the rotation. Like, I'm loving what Dusty May's doing. I think that he is, you know, bringing the John B line focus back to Michigan basketball, and it's awesome to watch.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. It's been really impressive, like, throughout. And after watching this team in the first game they ever played together and having them dominate us like they did, I was like, okay, they're gonna be legit in the Big Ten. I didn't expect first. I really didn't. I remember talking to our GA and he was like, man, they're gonna be first in the Big Ten. And I was like, are you sure? I don't know if they're first. And they proved me wrong. They're unreal. They're unreal. And especially like early in the year, you could see like how they're improving. They had turnover problems at the beginning of the year, lost some games they shouldn't, lost to Arkansas, lost to Oklahoma, 2 teams now at the bottom of the SEC, but Big Ten, but now in the Big Ten, Michigan's first. So it just shows you how much they've improved, how much they've gotten better. Golden's awesome. He's averaging 15.7 points a game. Danny Wolf has just given you an offensive, like, it's weird. It's so weird. You're seeing 2 7-footers run pick and roll with each other. Like, that's crazy. It's hard to stop, and he's been awesome. Trey Donaldson's great. And you got so many guys that can make plays on Michigan. And that's what you need. That's what you need. You need options like that. And I've been really impressed. I mean, I think they've looked awesome. And, it's a lot more than I expected for sure.
Yeah, I don't know how Dusty was able to recruit these guys to Florida Atlantic, but he is the whisperer for getting people that are going to buy into his system. You don't have a lot of people that are talking on the floor outside of
Yeah.
communicating with each other. Like, they play a clean cut style of basketball. You get subbed out if you're making mistakes. You are, fit into his system or it's not going to work. And they bought in. Like, Danny Wolf, one of the most intriguing prospects coming out of Yale, could have gone anywhere for sure. 7-footer that can handle the ball, definitely rusty, but has every talent that an NBA team might be looking for in the future. Chooses to come to Michigan and play in a style where he's not the only 7-footer on the team, right? Like, that's a crazy concept, I think, for most bigs to not, be the main person touching the ball in the paint. And it's allowed him to expand his game, right? It's allowed him to show off the 3-point ball, the pick and roll action, the passing, everything that, you want in maybe your point guard going into March. Danny Wolf has, right? Which is just
Yeah.
been super cool to see. Very unique. I think he could be in the running for best player in the country if he, had another year under his belt at Michigan, right? Like,
Mhm.
he's doing what Broom was doing last year at Auburn. You know what I mean? He's putting the team in situations where the ball's going to him and you can't stop it. And that's really cool to see versus the last couple of years at Michigan where it was a good amount of prospects that didn't really know who was the man and trying to recover after the Hunter Dickinson era. Now we're kind of finally back.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree completely. Looking at the Big Ten and looking at the tier one of teams, I would say my tier one is probably, and it's just because I haven't watched Maryland too much. Like, I know people are high on Maryland, so I need to watch them
Definitely.
more. But I'd say my tier one right now: Wisconsin, Purdue, Michigan State, Michigan. Would you agree with that?
I would. I think that Big Ten's definitely interesting compared. So just to put it in perspective, SEC has 13 or 14 teams that are in the tournament, and
Yeah,
6 of them off the bat. Like, you
yeah,
just know it by watching college basketball. The Big Ten, I don't know if you could name the 6 or 7 top teams that are going to make tournament. They have 11 teams in, right?
yeah.
So clearly they're just as deep as the SEC is without the top heavy nature of it. And I think the best example is the computer rankings. So the Big Ten has Wisconsin number one, right?
Hmm.
Wisconsin number one, and I don't think they're in the top 3 for some people's count, right? And it's, is there a reason for that, right? Or have they played an easy schedule? Are they getting lucky? Like, we'll find out in the next couple of weeks who the actual top teams are. If I had to put a pin on it, I would say, based on watching, Michigan State's number one and Michigan's number two, and they're probably going to split this year, which is super exciting as a fan, but also as a conference. I think that's like a good sign for where you're heading. Is those two teams can take care of business against the other top teams in the conference, like you said, like Wisconsin and Purdue, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would agree with that statement. Michigan State's like just so deep and they got a lot to that you want, you know. When we played them earlier in the year at LCA, like it was just so impressive because like their bigs just dominated us. Like they had, I think, 9 or 10 blocks in the game and we're just dominant and we kept it close. Like we played a really, really good first half and they were so good defensively that it was still tied at halftime. And then in the second half, they just marched on and blew us out. You know, like that's kind of team they are. Is like they'll be like, okay, like one half they might be not playing their best basketball, but then they figure it out. And then what I love about them too is like if one guy goes down, another guy steps up for them. You know, like they had one of their starters, I can't remember which one, but then Jace Richardson was inserted to the starting lineup and had
Yes,
30 points and went off. You know,
right.
like it's just that what you can have is just so huge for Michigan State. And I mean, their main guys, you still got Jaden Akins there, Jace Richardson, like I mentioned, and then Holloman, who had an unbelievable game last night. And then
Yeah,
Cohen Carr, who's incredible as well. Like they just got pieces all around that can make stuff happen. Like Frankie Fiedler, Kohler, Jeremiah Fears. These are all guys that in one game have stepped up for them and have won them the game. Like Jeremiah Fears was the last name I mentioned. He's leading them in assists with 6 assists per game. You know, like it's just like that. That's how deep they are. They're not really like star centered at all. Like I'd say Akins is probably the best player, but like he's not like, I mean, would you even call him a top 5 player in the Big Ten? Like, I don't know, you know?
yeah,
Like that's
probably
a hard
not. Top
question.
five on his team, sometimes not. You know what I mean? It's like you
Yeah.
said, you have 12 guys playing. It could be anyone's day. You got Xavier Booker coming off the bench, and he was a top five prospect, and he might not
Yeah.
play in a game. You know, so
Yeah.
it's very hard to manage as a coach. You know, it could be also their struggle, right? Their strength being depth, their struggle being who should we play because there's only so many minutes in a game. But that's like who Tom Izzo is, right? Like his style of offense. It doesn't matter what star you are or kind of what your shot volume was coming into the team. Like if you fit into his style of play, fast pace, hard defense, cuts, screens, getting other people open, you're going to do really well in the system. And that's why we see Holloman and Fears getting the minutes they are, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you asked me at the beginning of the year, like what needs to happen for Michigan State to win it all, I'd say that Richardson needs to be getting the most minutes on the entire team, right? He's so talented. He's one of there are few guards that can score consistently, right? The others are maybe a little streakier. But Holloman and Fears run the Michigan State offense so well that you can't afford to have them sitting on the bench, right? You will not be able to sustain that pace of play and assist to turnover ratio without those two out there. So I don't know. I've heard Michigan State fans being upset about it, right? Like sometimes they're not the best shooting team in the world. They tend to shoot more around the rim, which helps, right? But the 3 point shooting might not be as attractive, you know. Or they're saying like we're not letting our star players get good, right? We're not letting them get hot because they don't play enough. So it's definitely a conversation piece, right? But I think you have everyone there. You might need one guy to start stepping up because it's March, because it's getting to that time when you're going to make a run. I'm thinking about the Cassius Winston team, right? Like he had Miles Bridges and Jaren Jackson at one point, and who was the best player on the team? It was Cassius Winston, right? And it was
Yeah.
Xavier Tillman. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't the stars that were the ones that you were like, I need the ball in his hands at the end. And Michigan State, like you said, might have a star problem where they're missing that one guy. So I think you find one person to step up. I vote Jace Richardson. I think he's the man, but maybe it's, Holloman, like it was against Illinois. You find one guy that's going to step up at the end of game situation, and they're going to be a top four team for sure. If you don't, you might be looking at more of a 4 or 5 seed, which still dangerous, but that's just kind of where they're teetering right now.
Yeah. No, it's been on and off because like before the Izzo broke the record, like they were like winning every game, and then they went on a little losing skid before that, and you're like, man, what's going on with State? So they're figuring it out. They're getting stuff going. I'm not too worried about them, but I agree with you putting Michigan and Michigan State as the top two there. Middle of the pack teams, just to list them off: Maryland, UCLA, Illinois, Nebraska, Oregon, Ohio State. Those are the teams I'm going to list off there. Out of those teams, does anyone like kind of stand out to you? Like, oh, this could be a sleeper team for an upset potential.
I think you're running into the same problem with the SEC where I just don't know if they're going to be able to get enough wins to, make it matter in the tournament, right? Like
Yeah.
you might have some teams missing the tournament that you don't expect to because they have to play so many good teams. You have to go to Wisconsin, Illinois, right? You have to go out west and play Oregon, UCLA, and all of a sudden you're like, we need one more win to make the tournament. Right?
Yeah.
It's those 10th and 11th and or 8, 9, 10, 11 teams that are hovering around the bubble. It just may be too deep for them this year. It's crazy that Ohio State is top 30 in Ken Palm and they're 15 and 11, right? Like they're two losses outside of missing the whole thing. We might not be there. The team that definitely I think has caught people's attention has been Maryland.
Mhm.
I think that they kind of fly under the radar as a Big Ten team, but they've been top 10, top 20 in net the entire season, right? And I think what you said, kind of perfectly maps what you need in order to win is they have a great defensive unit, right? Top 20 defensive unit, and they have someone who can score the lights out.
Yeah.
They have a scorer that they know they're going to get the ball to every single time that he's out on the floor, right? Obviously, I didn't think that people would put Maryland in their top 5 Big Ten teams, but I think if you're sitting there and you are Purdue or Illinois, right, and you draw Maryland in the Big Ten tournament, like you're more scared than you were at the beginning of the year. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think that they're the team that I would watch out for over even I think some of the West Coast teams. I think that, you know, Derek Queen in Maryland is someone that I wouldn't want to run into personally on a, back-to-back schedule in Indianapolis trying to win the Big Ten.
Yeah, I like that. And the thing is that they're kind of overlooked. Like I mentioned, like I've been watching more Horizon League basketball, so I'm not like all Big Ten like centered, and I hadn't watched them as much, so I wasn't sure even to put them in tier one. So like in that case, they got a guy like Derek Queen, they got a guy like Gillespie getting people involved. So I'm looking forward to actually watching them more and seeing like how much I like them.
Yeah,
I would
agreed.
say in that group, the only other team that stands out to me is Illinois. And that's because of the talent level on that team. We saw it against Michigan State. They blew that game, but Jonas is unbelievable. NBA scouts are drooling over him. He's awesome. 16 points a game, 5 assists, 5 rebounds. He's awesome, can do it all. And we went to Illinois again this year, so I got to see them in action again. I'm telling you, I love Boswell. I talked about him last year at Arizona. I love how he defends. I love how he does stuff. He's not the greatest shooter in the world, but like if you get him off a pick and roll and you go under, you can't go under. Like he's gonna hit the three. So I think Boswell's unbelievable. And then Ivovich is awesome. Like he can really shoot the ball, and his twin brother, who's now at Arkansas, can really shoot the ball as well. We played both of them this year, so like looking at it that way, I think Illinois has the talent. I didn't even mention Will Riley, who's incredible off the bench, and NBA scouts are also drooling over him. I think he's around 15 or 16 in the first round. But like looking at it that way, there's so much talent there that if they're a 10 seed, like that's a scary 10 seed, in the
Yeah.
tournament that could do something. And the Big Ten have had those in the past. And I really think like if Illinois is sitting there, you just don't want to see them if you're a second round 2 seed in the tournament.
Yeah, it's funny. I think they're the only like top 30, top 20 statistically team that's having a bad year, right?
Yeah.
Like they
Yeah.
the fans are underwhelmed by how they're performing and yet they like have every statistical metric to be a really, really great team this year. So
Yeah.
I think Brad Underwood's figured it out there. I think they'll turn it around for sure. They'll, pick up some wins against lower Big Ten teams as they start to get more injured and a little tired towards the end of the year. And yeah, I agree. It could be based on the poll, could be based on how they end in March, just on a shooting streak, right? But I think that they definitely have what it takes to do something in the NCAA tournament, which is maybe like more than I could say for Oregon and UCLA, right? Who I think might be capped at their Big Ten performance. No knock on them at all. They have coaches that are great and players that can definitely get wins, but Illinois, like you said, is deep enough to make a run where it matters. And so I wouldn't give up on Illinois just yet. I would agree with you that they are someone that I wouldn't want to play in the Big Ten tournament and wouldn't want to play in the second weekend of NCAA tournament either.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree there. Before we get to our ending segments, there was another question. I want to talk about, is there one sleeper that like if you're going into March Madness like tournament and there's someone not talked about, is there one sleeper anywhere around the country that you've watched this year and you've been like, they're better than people think?
Yeah, I think that man, I think there's so many in the quote unquote minor four conferences, that I'm like, I don't know, like
Yeah,
SEC is
yeah,
great, but can they stop this style of basketball? Or, Big Ten's got good defensive units, but can they match up against Kansas, right? Like there's teams that we're not even talking about that you're going to see as like a 3 seed on your bracket or 2 seed even. You're going to be like, wait, like, should I have been watching this team, So
yeah,
I think that my sleeper, unfortunately, is no longer a sleeper, but I am in love with the St. John's Red Storm and what Rick
man,
Pitino
yeah,
is doing at St. John's. I think that it is exciting. It's intoxicating as a basketball fan to turn on TV and see Madison Square Garden going nuts for a college basketball team that Rick Pitino is coaching. It's definitely the storyline, right? And that's what people might overrate them for, is their headline grabbing coach and what he's done in New York. But let's look at the team. One of the top three defenses in college basketball, right? That doesn't just happen overnight. That's the Rick Pitino system he's built his entire career, right? That's finding guys the past 2 seasons that are going to buy in to winning what was the toughest conference in basketball, right? That's taking UConn to the buzzer, the two-time national champion, and making them look like they don't know how to guard a baseline out of bounds play.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
it's special. And I think that they have a couple of wings that are going to step up in the tournament play and start scoring more. They have guys that can hit 20, in any situation. They got a power forward that can shoot the three, right? Like they are a very very good team. But who am I going to put my money on to win it? Like Rick Pitino is the reason they're going to sneak by those wins. And I think if they can get a high enough seed, which they looks like they might, that could be dangerous for teams that have just gone through a gauntlet of an SEC and are a little beat up, having to play St. John's on a 1 week rest. I think that that
yeah.
could definitely be something I see as, upsetting Tennessee's season, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree completely. The thing with St. John's that impressed me so much, and I think it's why we both love them, is it feels like they're old school basketball. Just
Yes,
like
definitely.
put on the screen. They're picking you up full court. They're all over you. And it's just fun to watch that effort and that intensity like all over the court. And when they went
Yes,
into UConn and kind of like just stole the show. Like UConn could not get going in that game. And I get it. Liam McNeely was just coming back from injury. Like they were going through some things, but like man, it was just so impressive. I mean, they got a couple
it
forwards like Lewis Jr., who's unreal, 17.6 points a game.
he's
And
unreal.
yeah, Ika, one of their bigs, he's at 8 rebounds a game and
That's who I
13.9
was thinking
points.
of. He hit like
Yeah.
three threes in a row at one point in the Creighton game, and I was like,
Yeah.
this is wild. He's not even the top scorer that they're showing on the screen, and he's going crazy. So
Yeah, no,
yeah,
like
really
it's
cool.
all guys that can just make plays, and those are the
Yes.
kind of teams you just fall in love with, you know.
Yeah, they're in Chicago on Wednesday. I kind of want to go see them. They're playing
You should,
DePaul, and
you
then I
should.
don't know if we'll talk about them next segment, but they're playing UConn at the Garden on Sunday.
Ooh,
That's got to be the coolest, TV
yeah,
event of college basketball season. If you're in the Big East territory, if you're in the Northeast, if you're in New York,
yeah,
like that, that might be more people there than the next game. You know what I'm saying? So
it's
like that is
true.
just
It's
really
true.
cool to see.
Yeah, no, I mean they've been incredible this year. They're so much fun to watch, and they'll probably end up like a 3 seed too. You know, they're
Probably,
gonna
yeah.
be.
They've gotten some wins that
Yeah,
people thought they would be hit or miss, and they're putting it together right now. They might be a top seed, which is all that you need, with Patino.
yeah, no, it's wild. It's wild. I think if I had to pick a sleeper, and I'm looking at the top 25, I'm looking near the bottom. And this was a team that impressed me more in November, but have continued to show up like time and time again, is Memphis. They're awesome. They are awesome. PJ Haggerty and Harper are just so good. They're scoring and their 3 point success is just ridiculous. The thing with Haggerty is he's averaging 21.2 points per game in college. Like 20 points per game in college is so hard to do. And the reason why he's able to do it is because he's like just a foul merchant. He's able to get to the line and get those free throws. And it was like, especially in Maui, like nobody knew what to do with them. Like they made Michigan State look like I wasn't sure if Michigan State would be good this year after watching them play Memphis.
Right,
You know,
right.
and like now you're looking at Michigan State and they're one of the top teams in the country. And then same with UConn. they made like that UConn game, they outdueled the best offense in basketball. And UConn's still like one of the best basketball offenses in basketball, and they still outdueled them, which is just incredible to me. And then they run into Auburn, who we've seen as the tier one of college basketball. So I'm not really worried about that loss. And they just got so much over there that's just really impressed me. And they're out of conference. Like they did well. They won at Clemson, something Duke couldn't do. You know, like they've won games that like you're looking at it and you're just like, wow, you know, like these are really impressive. And I think they got the talent to be a second weekend team. I don't think they're a Final Four team or anything crazy like that, but I think they could definitely be a second weekend team. And I think this is the best team that Penny Hardaway has had.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they, hit on all three assets. They brought guys back, they recruited well, and they hit the transfer portal, right? Like
Yeah,
Dane Danger from Illinois is
yeah,
averaging 12 and
yeah.
6 a game. Like you knew when you plug and played him that he was going to do that, and he's executed, right? Like that's a
Yeah,
tribute
and
to
he's
good
their
coaching,
backup
good
center.
recruiting.
He's their backup
Right.
center, and he started at
Doesn't even
Illinois last
start.
year. Yeah, it's crazy. It's
So
crazy to me.
they have it all. I mean, I think the question is like, does the program have it? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
does the coach have it in round two of the tourney? Do they want it enough? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because I agree with you. You look at them, you know that they can win it all. You know they'll probably take care of their conference, right? And they'll do just everything that they need to be in a good spot in March relative to other teams, their skill level. We'll just see like can they put it together. So I'll put that on my teams to watch of the next 3 weekends. I'm not going to put them on upset alert just yet, but once you and I look at the bracket, it could drastically change with Memphis's 3-4 game run that they could go on for sure.
Yeah. 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 No, I agree with that. I like that. The bracket's going to tell us a lot. I mean, that's why the March Madness previews are definitely the ones you got to check out on Jake's Takes for
Definitely.
sure. For sure.
Definitely.
All right, so to close, we got a lot of rivalry games coming up, and these games will probably happen, and maybe we'll do a conference tournament breakdown or a NCAA tournament. We'll definitely get you ready for the NCAA, but I mean, the next time we see you, these games will be over. So if there's rivalry games that you're looking out for, Asher, what like three are you looking out for coming up?
Yeah, I think that there've been a couple this past 2 weekends that are just like getting me warmed up for it. And like you said, it's different in college basketball because losses might not necessarily matter, quote unquote, or you're going to play this team again on neutral site in your conference tourney, right? Like it's different than the college football rivalries that most universities have where it's like once a year, switch off home court, like let's just go. But
Yeah,
I think that there are a couple games where as soon as like the ball goes up, it doesn't matter the records, it doesn't matter what five are playing. As long as the jerseys are the same, it's gonna be a brawl to the finish. That's why we love college basketball. That's rare in the NBA these days, right? That's just something that you don't see in basketball in general. Like that gives you the feel of like, oh, this game means something, right? This means more than who's scoring the ball well. It's like every possession matters. Love that about college basketball. I think it's back this year for sure in a big way. I think that you have your top tier rivalries, and then you have ones that this year I think mean more. And I think number one would have to be Auburn, Alabama, right? They just finished
yeah,
up round one of their matchup last weekend. They've got another one to end the year. It's not one that you would put in your top basketball rivalries all time until the last probably decade, right? Like they don't have the history of winning the national championship. They don't even have the history of winning the SEC championship. And yet now we're looking at the top probably two teams in college basketball that have gone to the Final Four in the last 5 years, that have, head coaches that have been there for decades, right? Like, and will be there. They have all the makings of one of the best rivalries ever, and they're matching up twice this year as likely one versus two. Like, that is something that is just super special, and you got to enjoy it while it's there. You got to enjoy the fact that Janai Broom can get booed every time he walks on the court, and he'll still lead his team to a victory with 18 and 14, right, on a bad ankle. Like, that's just something that you don't get up for if it's Vanderbilt, right? Like, that's
yeah,
only a rivalry can do that. You watched on Saturday, and the coaches are screaming the entire game. Like, they're just on something different. The energy level is different. Every three-pointer shifts the crowd like none other. It's something that I think has always been the case with that rivalry, and now it's finally on like a national scale where you're like, this not only means something for the fans, but for the country in terms of who's going to be, the number one seed in March. So I'd say that would be my number one right now.
yeah. No, I love it. I love it. I mean, it's got to be your number one, right? Like it's just an incredible environment, and there's I was writing down like just how many rivalries there are, and it's just a great time to be a college basketball fan, because all of these are coming back. And I think the reason why they're coming back is like people like aren't really sure about the transfers and stuff, like they don't know every player on the team, so now it's centered on, okay, like I'm a fan of this team, I'm a fan of this coach, I'm a fan of this program. And I think like when an Auburn comes into an Alabama and you have a game like that where both of these teams are so good because of the talent they brought in, it just puts it on center stage. It's the same thing with the Michigan State now. Both these teams are at the top of the Big Ten. Like now everything's going to be riding on this game. Even Michigan, Ohio State, what we saw on Sunday, like it was a big time game because of the fact that Ohio State's near the middle of the pack of the Big Ten. They're good because they're bringing in these guys, and I think before the NIL age, we saw these higher major teams maybe have lower stakes because they couldn't field the talent. Now all the talent's going to those schools. So they might lose a couple games where they shouldn't lose because they're struggling with chemistry issues. But when we get down to the end of the season, when we get down to it, you're seeing these teams blossom at the right time.
Yeah, I think that's what a rivalry is for these teams. It's a
Yeah.
metric, right? At the end of the day, if you make the tournament as a coach, you're going to keep your job, right? That's just what it is. It's like you have to make a 64 team tournament and you're going to be okay the next year. Like, obviously, they want to win conference championships and win all that. But if you don't make the tournament, that's it. So sometimes these games that are in February and January can kind of slip by where you're like, okay, we dropped one, but we won three the next one's. Like, we're looking good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That doesn't matter when it's your rival suiting up against you, right? That doesn't matter when it's Michigan, Ohio State. That doesn't matter when it's Indiana, Purdue, right?
Yeah.
Indiana had been going on one of the worst runs ever. As soon as they lose to Purdue, they're firing their coach, right?
Yeah.
You'll see teams like Auburn watch Alabama go to the Final Four last year, and all of a sudden they're bringing in the best players possible in the transfer
Yeah.
portal, right? Like it means something when your rival's doing well, or when your rival's the one that's keeping you out of what you're trying to accomplish each season. It motivates you differently, right? Coaches get
Yeah.
fired for it, and that's just different, from any other sport, right? You see it in football a ton. You're seeing it in basketball now that NIL money is allowing players to go to whatever conference they want. I wouldn't put Ole Miss and Mississippi State in my top 10 rivalries, and they played a ranked game on Sunday, right? Like
Yeah.
they're more talented than they've ever been. So the rivalries are back in college basketball because the talent, like you said, it can be anywhere, right? And if your rival's doing something that you are envious of and is bringing in talent and money and recruits, you can copy that now. Like you can go do it, right? You can show your fans that you're dedicated to it because we're not going to be the second best team in this state, right? Like that's, I think, what's really cool about the Michigan State rivalry, the Auburn Alabama rivalry, the Arizona State rivalry, right? Like
Yep.
stuff that you might be like, yeah, they hate each other, but it's basketball. And now it's like, oh my God, like we have to be the powerhouse in this state, in this conference. It's so cool.
Yeah. I mean, perfect example is like I was watching Vandy versus Tennessee.
Right.
Like that's a
Right.
perfect example. Like I would never be watching that game 4 or 5 years ago because Vandy wasn't that level, and now they're actually
Exactly.
on that level. And I don't think like your average college basketball fan would know that, but Vandy's like that team. So I think it's really interesting. And like as I'm writing down rivalries, there's the classics like Duke, North Carolina. I think Auburn, Alabama deserves to be in there just because of what it's done football wise, things of that nature. And I think a lot of those SEC ones is mainly football that you're looking at, et cetera. But like you got like a Marquette St. John's, like all these Big East schools, that
Yes.
have had those rivalries in the past. Like I want Syracuse back, so then
Mm-hmm.
Syracuse can play Georgetown in a big time game, like
Exactly.
stuff like that. And I think those are coming back, which is so cool.
I agree. I think that's why North Carolina Duke was so great because they were meaningful not only as a rivalry but impact for the national picture, right? Like
Yeah.
it might determine who's going to win the Natty, who wins that game, right? Like
Hmm.
that had the history but also had the relevance. Now you're having
Yeah.
a lot more rivalries with relevance, a lot more
Yeah.
teams that are in a position to go deep in March. Like it's not just a rivalry game between Georgia and Florida that, oh yeah, we're football rivals, but this game doesn't matter. Like no, like Georgia is fighting for a spot in the top 10 of the SEC and Florida's
Yeah.
fighting for the number 1 seed, and they're both crazy talented, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just so much cooler, I think, to watch. And obviously it means something. Duke, North Carolina's in no pressure situation to lose their top rivalry spot, right? Kentucky, Louisville, always going to be a top rivalry. But I think you have these like smaller, maybe football centric rivalries that are shifting to basketball because you can spend money on a head coach who's going to bring in six talented players and win a national championship now, right? Like you can just
Yeah.
do it. And that's so cool, I think, for, like you said, some of these schools that maybe have the assets for it, but haven't had the basketball culture before.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree completely. We got a lot of games. We got a lot of games. Is there one that stands out for you going
Yeah, I
into?
think that Sunday. I think we talked about them already. UConn, St. John's, and
Yeah.
Purdue, Indiana. Like
Yeah.
CBS, Fox. Like turn them on. It's going to be awesome. Best announcers, best venues. Going to be great. The game of the weekend for me is Michigan State
Yeah.
on Friday, and I think we're going to get into it to end. But here's why: one, it's one of the top five rivalries that covers both football and basketball, right? They both have histories of winning national championships. In basketball, they both have histories of going to multiple Final Fours, right? The Big Ten has fallen off in terms of basketball, but those two teams have always stayed towards the top in terms of when they play. It's going to be a top 15 matchup, right? This year, we have a brand new head coach for Michigan, right? We have a Michigan State team that hasn't been to the Final Four in 6 to 7 years, who is just itching for another one of those deep runs. And they finally feel like they have the pieces in play. And you're meeting this late in February with both teams ranked in the top 15. It's going to be an awesome game. It's going to be a crazy environment. I think that the game itself is going to be cool to see. Like, are 4 7-footers going to interact on the court together, right? Like, there might be 4 7-footers at a time out there because Michigan State is the only other team I think in the Big Ten that can match them in terms of height because they play power forwards who are 6'10" and up.
Yeah.
So how is that going to balance? Is Michigan State going to be able to keep up Michigan shooting? Is Michigan going to be able to break down Michigan State's defense turnover wise? Like there's a lot of puzzles that are going into it. And it feels like you haven't seen this rivalry in a long time and it's finally back, right? So
Yeah.
I think cameras on, who's going to shine? Michigan State, 7 p.m., I believe Eastern on Fox on Friday is going to be the game of the weekend. I'm excited to watch. I think as a Michigan fan, it's big in Dusty May's legacy, which we're crossing our fingers about right now. So I'm hoping that he can turn it up for that game. It means something different to beat Ohio State and Michigan State back to back. Like that's just something that few coaches do at Michigan in basketball and would be monumental for his success, not only this year, but hopefully in the future.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's going to be a wild matchup. Like I'm actually really looking forward to that game. Do we have a game same time? So I won't be able to watch it, but I'll be
Dang.
checking in after the game and be like, all right, I gotta catch up for that one. But okay. So do we want to rank these rivalries top five? Like, what do you want
Yeah,
to do with this?
I think if we're going, I'll do all time quickly, and then you can maybe do who you're looking for this year. But I think you
Okay.
go Duke, North Carolina, you go Kentucky, Louisville, and those have been the top two just for a while and probably won't
That's what
be
I wrote
touched.
down too. Yeah, I didn't have. Yeah.
And then my third for just in terms of history is probably going to be Purdue, Indiana, top two winningest teams in the Big Ten. Best coaches, like got had championship level teams, like always going to be a bloodbath. Indiana, the state of basketball, right? I think it's just tough to knock on that. Finally, you're getting better at football, maybe in Indiana, but at the same time, like it's always going to be a basketball state. That just means more when they play. The best environments in college basketball are there. I think those are probably the top three for me.
Yeah. No, I actually had the same top three as you. I wrote it down and I was like, yeah,
Who would your
Indiana,
top three
Purdue
for
has
this
got to be
season be then? If those
for
three,
this
kind
season.
of down years for this season, who has been the best to watch, or who are you looking forward to watching?
I mean, like, if you're ranking those games, like, let's say,
Yeah,
like, for this season,
yeah,
I'd probably go the best game would have been Louisville, Kentucky, and I did watch that game early, and that was an awesome game because Louisville's, like, shooting the lights out. They're second in the ACC. They finally figured it out and are playing great, and Kelsey's an unbelievable coach. He's like a energy guy, a funny guy. I like him a lot. He's great. And then Mark Pope with Kentucky, like, we talked about it, they're middle of the pack, and I kind of ripped on them that they're still not playing great defense. But
right.
I
He's
like
doing a
him
great
way
job.
more. Yeah, I think he's
Yeah,
doing a great job. And I think
yeah,
their offense is like the motion concepts are great. And I think their defense, like, while it is not great, like they're playing against the best offensive talent like in the SEC day in and day out. So I don't think it's as bad as like last year's Kentucky's defense, but which could make them win a game or win two games and make the Sweet 16. Like I said, if Kentucky got past Oakland, they could make it far.
Mm-hmm.
Because those teams have done that. They've made it far. I just don't think they're a championship level team.
Yep,
That's the only thing with Kentucky there.
that's
So
fair.
I would say out of those three teams, like that's the best one. Another one I wrote down was like Baylor and Houston. I think that
Nice,
one has always been like a great Big 12
definitely.
rivalry. Like this year, Baylor's a little bit down. Like we expected more with VJ Edgecombe, and we didn't even talk about the Big 12. Like Houston's awesome. Iowa State's awesome. Texas Tech is turning on. I need to watch more of
Yeah,
them. I'm excited about them. So like there's a
that's a good
lot
one.
there. Yeah, so I think that one would be another one. And then the other two I wrote down was Xavier Cincinnati. That was actually cool this year because since he
Yep,
started out hot,
yep.
but since he's kind of fallen apart since then, and Xavier's been middle of the pack. And then another one's Gonzaga St. Mary's. They're always
Nice.
just top of the top tier, the WCC. Gonzaga, that's another disappointing one. Like what happened with them? We were talking so high on them before the year, and they just kind of fell apart. I don't know what's going on.
I think the best part is that they're playing teams that are, not as great overall and kind of getting exposed for it, but it's giving them
Yeah,
like minutes to figure it out, Like,
yeah,
they're going to make the tourney for sure, but they usually don't lose in the middle of the season. So now it's like, what are we doing? Like,
yeah,
were those early season losses a sign that might not be the year? They're top 10 in defense, they're top 20 in offense, they'll be fine, right? They just got to maybe do what other teams do and take some time to figure it out. Maybe not be a number one seed, but still have a chance to like be dangerous.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
quick story, but we played Oregon State in Hawaii, right? And like barely lost that game in a tough overtime game. And we were playing Detroit the first time. And this is the day after Oregon State beats Gonzaga at home. And Gonzaga's ranked like 16 at the time, something like that. And Campy starts his pregame speech with like, uh, I saw last night that Gonzaga lost to Oregon State. And the only thing I could think about was, dang, we should have won that game. And I'm just like, man, he's starting the speech out with that. And we came out and beat Detroit. Like it was all good. But like it just shows you like how much, like, especially for a mid-major team, like losing those games hurts. Like it's so killer because that's like a quad 2, quad 3 win, whatever. And like that's big time for us, like last
It
year.
is. Everyone that plays
Yeah.
Gonzaga or, a team like that, it's their Super Bowl. Like
Yeah.
they're gonna give you their best game. So even if it's, you're like, why is Gonzaga losing? It's like when they walk in the building, just like when Oakland's playing a Power Five team,
Yeah.
Power Six team, it means something to that team, right? Like
Yeah.
that's all the chance they get, right, to be on national television until their conference tournament. So I agree with you. Like Gonzaga is gonna face the best of every opponent they play.
Mm-hmm.
And as we know in college basketball, right, talent's never been more dispersed than ever, right? Maybe this is the year St. Mary's does it, So it's very interesting. I agree with you there. That's a great point.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about it. I'm excited about it a lot. We got great college basketball. This has been
We do,
crazy
we
year.
do.
Crazy. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
super excited. But Asher, I mean, really appreciate you coming on. I'm looking at the timer. We went like an hour. We were going crazy.
yeah. This isn't even the preview, but preview of the preview. I think biggest thing is just start watching college basketball now. Turn it on a Saturday. The games, you got 6 games going in a time slot, and you can just flip to the ending of all of them. You're going to see some crazy stuff happening, some buzzer beaters you're not expecting, some teams that are falling and looking like, I'm not going to pick them at all in the tourney. All of a sudden, they're going to be in the Final Four team. So start watching now.
Yeah.
It's going to be super fun this year. Appreciate you having me on, Jake.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, that's going to wrap up the show for today. Thank you guys so much for listening, watching, wherever you're at. Go like, subscribe on YouTube, give us those 5 stars, and I'll be back at you guys soon. Peace.